Hey everybody, welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid and another installment of October Nights, 31 Tales for the Halloween season. The book is available on Amazon in both print and Kindle. The link is in the description box below. Times are tough due to COVID-19 and sometimes financially, times are just tough for a lot of people anyway. So if you can't afford to buy the book, keep coming back to the channel as we will be doing a reading every evening here for the month of October. I've put together a playlist, so if you've missed some of the stories or you want to go back and hear them again, just look for the playlist on our channel called October Nights. We've had to skip one of the stories already because it's not appropriate for this channel. One of the things that we vehemently avoid on this channel is politics because it's divisive and we don't want to divide people. We don't want to alienate anybody. So we skipped that story, and there might be another story or two down the road that just aren't appropriate for the channel for that reason or others. But the majority of these will be read. Thank you for joining me here for the reading. Now, I'm not going to give a whole lot of backstory on this story. We're on October 10 now, and the title of the story is The Tale of Old Red Eyes. And this one is dedicated, it says, for PJ, the greatest storyteller I've ever known. PJ was a very good friend of mine. He's passed on now. He lived to be about 82, but he was the greatest storyteller I ever knew. And he has influenced me as a storyteller more than any writer. Stephen King's my favorite. I love Mark Twain. Michael Crichton is one of my favorites. I could go on. Edgar Allan Poe, Ray Bradbury, but PJ, if it wasn't for PJ, I don't think I would have ever been a writer. Even though PJ wasn't a writer, he told stories orally, the oldest tradition in which stories have been passed down. And this is one of those stories that he kind of passed down to me. And I'm not going to tell you too much about him more than that for now, because later on in the book, there's a story called PJ's Cabin, where I tell you quite a bit about PJ. But if you do read my work, and if you've read From the Graves of Babes, a novel I wrote almost 10 years ago, then you're already familiar with this individual. So it's been raining off and on, so with no further ado, while I have a break from the rain, I'm going to slip into grandpa mode here with the readers and get straight to the story. Again, October 10, The Tale of Old Red Eyes. For PJ, the greatest storyteller I ever knew. Now, boys, this is the last ghost story I'm going to tell you. PJ was old by now, by our standards. He was 50. We were 15, and it was our greatest aspirations to achieve his age and his aged wisdom on our own someday. But Christ, how many people actually lived for half a century? Because last time I came up and told y'all fellers ghost stories, I was kind of wondering if I was even going to make it home or not. I'm getting too old to outrun the devil or his helpers, so I got to stop this storytelling business if I ain't too late already. PJ had grown up on the mountaintop where we were camping. It was his cabin. It had been his home for many years before he decided a few years before the time in which our story is set to build another one at the foot of the hill about half a mile away. And it was a half mile straight up and down, so it might not have made much sense from just reading this to go through the efforts of building another house only a half mile away. But I'd challenge anyone reading this or listening to this to try to drive that half mile in wintertime. This was West by God, Virginia, and these were the Appalachian mother-loving mountains. And the only reason I'm going to finally tell y'all fellers this story, he continued, is because I feel like I've got to get it off my chest. PJ was a Vietnam War veteran. He'd served 20 years in the Navy, and after he retired, he went back to live up the hollow where he'd grown up in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains in West by God, Virginia. Now, first, that was a very loud tree knock. Almost sounded like a gunshot, but that was not a gunshot. Now, the first time I saw him, PJ said, had to have been, 30 years or so ago now. First time you saw who, I asked. Old Red Eyes, he said, as if I were crazy. So the first time I saw him, me and three of my best good buddies had been out hunting. Turns out it was actually Halloween. So after we was done hunting, we decided we'd build us a little campfire right there in the woods where we'd regrouped and we'd tell us some ghost stories. He had us pulled in already, even though it was just the beginning of his tale. He was good like that. Of course, he said, with a look on his face that said he was remembering something, I was the one who ended up telling all the stories. Even in his youth, PJ had been the greatest storyteller for miles around. It's as if he'd been born with the gift. You either have it or you don't, and PJ had it. It's the kind of thing that you can't just get good at, I believe, and I also believe that had PJ ever pursued a career in writing, people today would be saying, "Who the heck is Stephen King?" And for the record, King is my favorite author, so that's meant as a compliment. So, boys, did I tell a good one that night? I mean, it was a whopper. One of the stories that you just make up as you go along, and it's so good there's no way you could ever remember it and tell it again. It was one of those. You had to be there to hear it while it was told kind of stories. You mean I said it wasn't true? Heck no, PJ said. The best ones never are. Like that one guy said, fiction has to make sense. The true stories don't make no sense, so they're not that good. Then how do we know that the story you're telling us tonight is true? One of my buddies asked. 'Cause it don't make no sense, PJ said with hesitation, and it ain't that good. It's just what happened, and I'm just trying to get it off my chest. The master was at work. By saying this, he knew exactly what he was doing. It made us want to hear his story even more, true or not. So after I tell these boys this story, PJ continued, we all head off the hill for home. We all lived up this holler, but our houses were all spread out quite a ways, see? I dared to look around the room, and I saw that my buddies were all staring at PJ, wide-eyed, completely enthralled, just as I had been before looking away from him, so I looked back at our speaker. So we all head off the hill in 3 different directions. I get about 100 yards down the hill, and I hear what sounds like footsteps coming up behind me. So I stop, and I look back, and about 50 yards back, I see these 2 red eyes just a-glowing. Why, I ain't seen nothing like that in my life. What was it? One of my buddies asked. We tried to never interrupt PJ when he told us his stories, but man, they were so enthralling, so it made it hard. Why, it was old Red Eyes, PJ said, again without hesitation. Who is old Red Eyes? I asked. Don't reckon I know, he said, but I think I have an idea, and if and you boys will just stop interrupting an old man, I'll get to it. We all mumbled, okay, and he continued. So I looked back only once more that night because I was too scared to look back more than that, and I didn't even look back that other time till I saw the lights on in the house, and I knew I could make a run for it and be inside in just a few seconds. And by God, just like in West by God, Virginia, there were them 2 red eyes just a-glowing in the dark. PJ took a pause before speaking again. We couldn't tell if it was due to him remembering what happened next or if he was scared, just reliving the memory. About 25 years later, he said when he finally spoke again, which was only a few years back now, my nieces and nephews were up here camping, just like y'all fellers are tonight, and I came up and told them some ghost stories, and boys, on that night I told them another whopper. I mean, it was one good enough to be put in a book. Of course, I can't remember it to retell it, because I made it up as I was going along. You know the kind. One of those you had to be there to hear it to really enjoy it kind of stories. Well, anyway, on the way back down off the hill, because I wasn't camping with them, see, I heard footsteps coming up behind me, just like all those years before. I could tell it wasn't a deer or a bear or a coon. I know the difference between a critter that walks on 2 legs and one that walks on all 4s. So just as y'all fellers would have probably done, I hightailed it to the house, and I locked the door behind me. What was it, I asked, though I already knew. Why, it was old Red Eyes, PJ said. So what in the heck is this old Red Eyes thing, one of my buddies asked. Well, if you let an old man finish his story, you'll know, PJ said. We let him. So when I was up here last night telling y'all fellers stories, PJ began, that Bigfoot Sasquatch story you told us was awesome, one of my buddies said, and we all elbowed him for interrupting. Yeah, PJ said, giggling, that was a good one. What a whopper. Anyway, he continued, when I went home last night, after telling y'all fellers those stories, I kid you not, guess who followed me home? Old Red Eyes, my 3 friends and I said in unison. That's right, PJ said, old Red Eyes. What'd you do, I asked. Well, I ran like heck, PJ said, and it was hard going. I'm pert near half a century old. I'm too old to be out running demons, and that's exactly what I think old Red Eyes is, a demon. And that's why I can't tell y'all fellers any more of these here stories. What's it want, I asked, this demon? Pert near as far as I can figure, PJ said, which is Appalachian American for the best that I can guess, is that old Red Eyes just loves a good story well told. And that was it. No further explanation. You're kidding, one of my buddies said. He was the analytical type, the one to whom everything had to make sense. He went on to be an accountant for the government. And that's what I was trying to tell y'all fellers earlier, PJ said. The best stories ain't true because they make sense. Like that Twain filler said. The real life stories, they ain't as good because they don't make no sense. I would end up losing touch with PJ for many, many years. I grew up and I left that little mountain town. I got a college education and moved to a city and became a stockbroker. Years later, when the Twin Towers fell, I joined the military and got to see the beautiful landscapes and war zones of Iraq behind the sights of a .50 caliber machine gun after having gone down and enlisted in the Army National Guard to get my payback. One night, while driving across the Arabian Desert near the end of our deployment, during which I'd seen crap that I wish wasn't real and that definitely made no sense, just like PJ and that Twain guy said, I made myself a promise. I promised myself that if I made it home alive and not in a pine box, that I was no longer going to do the things that I didn't enjoy doing, like being a stockbroker, and that I was only going to do the things that I enjoyed doing. What I enjoyed most was telling stories. I pert near decided that night, while riding across the desert, hoping not to get my backside shot off, that I was going to go home and become a writer, and I by God did, just like the by God in West Virginia. I went back and visited my old friend PJ for the first time in 20 years after making it home from the war. I missed him. I missed his stories. But as a combat veteran now myself, I think I understood some things about him that I hadn't before. His desire to live alone with his family on a mountaintop and be left the ever-loving hell alone by the rest of the world. It's people filled with their opinions, all based on crap they saw on TV, like the news, and from crap they heard from other people, or even things they read in a book, but not based on any actual experience. Heck, it took me no time at all to find out that if I talked about what was really going on in Iraq and what I saw, I could get my accounts canceled on social media, and everyone would call me a liar due to that my grandfather was a veteran and he never talked about it, so if you're talking about it, you're lying, and you're probably not even a veteran bull crap. Veterans envy, I've come to call it, because it always comes from beta males who never served and who feel like less of a man in the presence of anyone who has served. But I stopped talking about it pert quick, nonetheless, as PJ might have said. But I talked about it with PJ, and he helped me. He helped me immensely. He helped me so much more than those social workers they call counselors at the VA and all those GD pills they gave me ever did. At one point, I had 8 different prescriptions, and son of a gun if I could even tell you my birth date when I was on all of them. But PJ told me stories. He told me stories of his war experiences. He told me what worked for him as far as coping goes, and he told me that he thought the promise I'd made to myself that night in the Arabian desert would be the best promise I could make to myself, and it would be a great thing if I kept it. And I have. I wrote a novel very tightly based on my years growing up on PJ's Mountain. It's a novel called From the Graves of Babes, and you can get it on Amazon, just like you did this collection of stories you're reading now. PJ was one of the main characters in that story. Well, one of the main characters in that story were tightly based on PJ, even the character's name. And as one of my greatest honors to this day, the PJ got to read that book before he died, an accomplished old man and a hero, just a couple of years back. The last time I saw PJ, I asked him if he remembered the tale of Old Red Eyes. He said he did. I asked him if it was true or not, and he said, I read that book you wrote, the one with me in it. Yeah, I said. Be careful with your storytelling going forward, he said. He said it like a warning. Why, I asked. You're getting pretty good at it, he said, pausing. Your storytelling. After appearing to think for a moment, he said, I fear you're going to end up getting the answer to your own question if you keep at it. The end. So guys, this one was shorter than some of the others have been, but it was very sweet. A lot of sweet memories there for me. PJ was a wonderful man. Again, I've said it 3 times already, but the greatest storyteller I ever knew. So I know this one's shorter than usual, but that's all there is to it. So if you saw anything behind me moving around, I hope you time-stamped it. If you heard something, let me know. I want to thank you again for being here with me for another episode of ON, as longtime viewer and supporter and positive commenter James Lynch says we should call it, because I guess we're not doing the PBS thing right now. We're doing the ON thing, October Nights. Again, available on Amazon, print or Kindle, but if you don't have the money, or if you just don't want to spend the money, keep coming back to the channel for more readings. See you for more at the next one.